minutes, you will see the red light coming up. Okay, we are going to start with the first presenter, Chris Petricola. This is the invited talk. The title is Tropical Cyclone Frequency, the Role of Seas and the Large-Scale Environment. Chris is going to present from Zoom. Okay, Chris, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. I hope, can you see my slides now?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, well, thanks so much, Ellen, Pat. So AGU had asked us to make pre-recording, so I will play that now. Thank you. With you today. I will be talking about. Good morning, I'm Christina Petricola. It's a pleasure to share my research with you today. I will be talking about the role of seeds and the large-scale environment in controlling tropical cyclone frequency. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge the many contributors to this research, DOE and NERSC for support and supercomputing resources that made this research possible, and the session organizers for inviting me to present. Starting with the overarching problem, tropical cyclones have caused over $1 trillion in damages in the US going back to 1980. There's no consensus on how the global number of TCs may change in the future. And this is a big problem because damages tend to increase with increasing number of TCs. So this really motivates the need for reliable future projections globally. In addition, there's no theory to explain why the global number of TCs has been observed to be relatively constant from year to year, as we can see from the figure on the bottom right. This is showing the global TC count going back to 1980. And we can see that the year-to-year variations are about 10% of the mean. The overarching objective of this talk is to understand the controls on TC number. We consider two different possibilities. The first, tropical cyclone seeds, and the second, large-scale ocean variability. First, the influence of TC seeds on TC number. Let's start with some background on the most common type of TC seed in the Atlantic, African easterly waves. AWs are a trough of low pressure that occur between 850 and 600 hectopascals. They generate over the Sahel and propagate westward, where they may have the potential to form into a tropical cyclone over the Atlantic Ocean. They peak during the Atlantic hurricane season with, on average, about 60 African easterly waves per year. And although they're strongly linked with TCs on the synoptic timescale, some of our work in 2018 showed that there is not a strong link between easterly waves and tropical cyclones in the Atlantic on the seasonal timescale. The previous study was based on climate model simulations at 27-kilometer resolution, and therefore is subject to uncertainty due to the use of convective parameterization. Here, I will be presenting highlights of research first authored by Derek Danso and recently published in GRL. And we are addressing the question, how does suppressing the typical Atlantic TC precursor, African easterly waves, influence seasonal Atlantic TC number in a convection permitting model? In addition to resolving convection, another benefit of using the high resolution is that this allows representation of major hurricanes, which was not possible with coarser resolution. So here we ran some experiments at 3.5 kilometer resolution with the WRF regional climate model. The control ran from the 1st of August through the 31st of October of 2020, so focusing on the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season during a year in which many of the TCs formed from African easterly waves. And we configured the domain specifically so that the eastern lateral edge allows us to control the African easterly wave activity that is prescribed into the regional model. In the experiment, we applied a 2 to 10 day filter on that eastern edge denoted in green in order to suppress the African easterly wave activity. And for both sets of experiments, we ran a 3-member ensemble. One of our main results is that by suppressing African easterly waves, there was no significant change in the August through October number of Atlantic TCs. This is consistent with what we found in the 27-kilometer resolution experiments. So this is giving us robust evidence of those conclusions. However, we did see important changes in TC characteristics, including genesis location and TC intensity. For more, I encourage people to visit a poster by Derek Danso on Tuesday morning. In the previous study, we focused on the relationship between TCs and AEWs in the historical climate, but we're also interested in this relationship in the future. The problem we aim to address is that there has been no consensus on the role of TC seeds in future TC number. There's been quite a bit of work on this, so you might be wondering, why is there this lack of consensus? And I would say that it boils down to what we know about correlation, not necessarily indicating causation. So we can observe that there is a correlation between TCs, AEWs, and the large-scale atmosphere and ocean conditions. So it can be easy to confuse AEWs as causing TC variations. But here I would put forth that TCs and AEWs are both influenced by the large-scale environment rather than TC number being directly controlled by AEWs. So the question that we address here is, what is the relationship between the typical Atlantic TC precursor, AEWs, and Atlantic TCs in a future climate? This research is first authored by Emily Berkos-Hickey and is currently under review. We investigated this question using 3 models from the High Resolution Model Intercomparison Project, which were run at sufficient resolution to represent TCs and African easterly waves, which we tracked with objective tracking algorithms. The climate states looked at the historical as well as the future out to 2050. So what we're looking at here in this figure is the relationship between the future change in African easterly waves on the x-axis and the future change in Atlantic TCs on the y-axis. So each point refers to one model simulation. And this line here is the 1-to-1, which would indicate similar changes in easterly waves and TCs in the future. But what we actually see here is a lot of the models falling into these other quadrants. So, I have some arrows here to mark where the changes in the easterly waves and TCs are actually opposite sides. So this tells us that future changes in the number of African easterly waves poorly indicate future changes in Atlantic TC number. Now we move on to the second potential influence on TC number, and that is large-scale ocean variability. The influence of ocean variability on TC activity is very well understood regionally, so for individual TC basins. For example, if we think about seasonal Atlantic hurricane prediction, often the El Nino Southern Oscillation and the Atlantic Meridional Mode are some factors that can be considered. But the question here that we want to address is, how does global TC number depend on these kinds of modes of tropical ocean variability? This research is based on the senior thesis of Danny Cassidy and was published in GRL this year. Here we analyzed observations of global TC frequency and accumulated cyclone energy and their relationship with ENSO and AMM indices from 1980 to 2021. The way we analyzed the data was to consider the bottom 15th percentile and the top 85th percentile of the climate modes. The box plots show the corresponding data for named storm days in the figure on the left. What we can see is a systematic shift with fewer TCs during La Nina conditions, which correspond to the bottom percentiles of the ENSO indices, and more TCs during El Nino conditions. The results are insensitive to the ENSO index choice, including the ENSO longitude index, or ELI, and the Nino 3.4. We did see that the AMM has some influence, but is less pronounced than ENSO's, and we also find similar results for ACE. In summary, we found robust evidence that TC seeds are not a primary influence on TC number. And I want to point out that this is part of a growing body of evidence to support this idea, including a paper by Emmanuel from this year. We do have research underway to investigate the influence of AEWs on TC landfall using large ensembles of simulations that are suitable to investigate the spatial statistics. In addition, we found that large-scale ocean variability substantially influences global TC number, with greater number of TCs during El Nino events. Along those lines, I encourage people to stick around in this session for a talk by Taryn Mueller on future changes in the ENSO Atlantic TC teleconnection, and to check out a talk by Nathan Erickson on future changes in ENSO on Friday at 2:45. Thank you, and I would be happy to take any questions during the discussion period, and also welcome people to email me.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Time for one quick question. Please come to the microphone.
Hi, it's Songling Xie. Can you talk a little more about in the suppressed AEW experiments, the TC number doesn't change, so how do they actually form?
This is a really good question and something that we have underway for our research. There are a couple of mechanisms by which they can form in observations, especially in other basins and in idealized model simulations. So we know that in the West Pacific, TCs can form from low pressure disturbances associated with the monsoon trough. In the Atlantic, sometimes we see wave breaking of the ITCZ, and then some idealized model experiments also suggest self-aggregation of convection. So those are all some potential mechanisms that we plan to look into.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We need to move on. And the next talk is by Kuang-Yu Lu. The title is The Structure of Seed Effect, Its Ability to Survive the Planetary Raspberry Waves on a Barotropic Beta Plane.
Can everyone hear me? We're good? Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kuang-Yu Lu, and this is a short talk for a new idea about how does planetary Rossby wave drag limit a tropical cyclone seed structure. And this is a collaboration work with my advisor, Professor Daniel Chavas in Purdue University and Professor Tim Cronin from MIT. So what is a tropical cyclone seed? Though the previous talk gives pretty much very sufficient introduction, I still briefly talk about that. So tropical cyclone usually genesis from a pre-exist convective vortex, which is a tropical cyclone seed. And these three figures here show an example seed generated from African easterly wave. And this seed eventually grows into the Hurricane Helen in 2006. And this figure is the IR image of this seed. And this one is the Herf-Muller diagram of the rain rate from TRAM data. And this one is the mid-level vorticity from ERA in terrain. So as you can see, there are many rotational convection during analysis period, which is indicated by those black contours, and they all have different persistence time. And however, only one seed, this one, and the longest persist one is developing into a tropical cyclone. So this is the first motivation that raised our interest in seed persistence. Also motivated by some previous studies that mentioned the potential importance seed counts in setting the genesis counts. For example, according to a conceptual model proposed by Xie et al. 2020, the processes of TC genesis can be a three-step of development, a convective cluster, and a seed, and eventually tropical cyclone. The transition of each phase is controlled by different physical process and have different probability. Therefore, if a seed vortex can persist longer, which means this phase, the seed phase, can last longer, it might have a higher chance to undergo TC genesis. So motivated by these, the first question we are asking is, why do tropical cyclone seed have different persistence? hypothetically, if they are all in a similar convective favorable tropical environments, is there a pure dynamics factor that can affect the persistence of seed? We do acknowledge that actually the environmental parameter is very important for seed development. Welcome to stay for the next talk from Lingwei. She will talk about that. But we're trying to find a dry dynamic factor that can affect the TC seed development. So importantly for the persistence. So if we can find one, it might also affect the TC genesis forecast. So we do have a theory for this question, which is the planetary Rossby wave drag. So what is a wave drag? So when a boat is sailing on the ocean, it will have the wave drag by stimulating gravity wave. And same thing happened to TC as well. When the tropical cyclone is rotating on the planet Earth, it will also have wave drag by stimulating planetary Rossby wave. And we published a paper earlier this year to demonstrate that this planetary Rossby wave drag can spin down the outer circulation of the TC and limit the tropical cyclone size. And these two animation is showing you that how does the planetary Rossby wave drag a tropical cyclone-like vortex from a barotropic beta plane simulation. And contours here is the wind speed, and the curves here is plotting the tangential wind profile accordingly. And as you can see, the wave drag quickly spin down and dissipating the outer circulation. And this reduce this also causing by the reducing the vortex size. And to characterize this planetary Rossby wave drag effect on the tropical cyclone, we derive a new parameter called Rhinespeed profile, which is this dashed line here. And what is a Rhinespeed? Rhinespeed is the theoretical minimum circulation speed on a beta plane at every radii. So if a circulation is slower than the Rhinespeed at the same radius, it will be significantly dragged by planetary Rossby wave and eventually dissipated. So we can say that this Rhinespeed profile serves like a dynamical pouch, which analog to the thermodynamical pouch proposed by Dr. Michael Montgomery in the past. And so a circulation that is either stronger enough or small enough to stay inside this dynamical pouch can prevent itself from planetary Rossby wave drag. And well, this gives us a new question. So what if a vortex has most of its strong wind outside the Rhinespeed profile and outside this dynamical pouch? Will the planetary Rossby wave drag dissipate the whole vortex? So to explore this, we conduct 30 barotropic beta plane experiments. Each have initial vortex with different maximum wind speed, which is Vmax, and radius of the maximum wind speed, which is Rmax. This figure shows initial profile, all the initial profiles we have. By systematically varying the Vmax and Rmax, we can test how does planetary Rossby wave drag in the intensity of different vortices. And this figure shows the Vmax evolution relative to its initial value. Black curves are those surviving vortex and corresponding to those green initial profiles here. And the dashed curves are those dissipating experiments, which is also corresponding to these dashed profiles here. So seems like the Rhinespeed profile divided these vortices into two groups, persisting one and dissipating ones. And all these persisting green profiles here have a more compact structure, which means a smaller Rmax or a stronger Vmax. So can we use this Rhinespeed profile to quantitatively tell the major difference between the persisting and dissipating vortex? And now introducing the vortex compactness as the ratio between a vortex maximum wind Vmax and the Rhinespeed at the same radius, which is this VRH. So the compactness we define as Vmax over VRH. So if a vortex has a stronger Vmax or a smaller Rmax, it will have a higher compactness. And this scatter plots on the right side shows the relation between the initial compactness of the every vortices, which is the x-axis, and their intensity decreasing, which is the y-axis. So the result shows that the vortex with a more compact initial structure will decay intensity less. So it seems like there is a compactness threshold between persisting vortex, which those black dots. No, the persisting profile is those green dots, and the dissipating vortex, which is the black dots. The threshold of the compactness is about, in this experiment, is about 3.5. And the result shows that the vortex with a more compact initial structure will decay intensity less. And overall, this compactness limitation theory demonstrates that when there is only planetary Rossby wave drag in the system, vortex compactness is the key factor that affects how much the vortex intensity will decrease. A vortex needs to have a compact structure to persist in the planetary Rossby wave drag. So finally, comes our with this theory, we can ask the research question next: is does a developing seed in the real world has a compact structure? So we will try to answer this by demonstrate you a case study. We'll find a developing seed from reanalysis data, and if this seed is dynamically structured, can persist in a model that only permit planetary Rossby wave drag, that means this seed is dynamically compact enough. So first, we track a seed in 2019, which eventually grows into Typhoon Fengwang. And this animation demonstrates the data from ERA5. The shading is mid-level vorticity, and the contour is the rain rate and the total column rain rate. So the green circle here is the seed we are tracking, and the black cross is the center of the Typhoon Fengwang provided by IB track. So next, when the seed reach its maximum intensity, we extract the azimuthal average vorticity structure and use that seed structure from the reanalysis data to initialize the barotropic model. And finally, I'll skip that one. So finally, we can initialize the barotropic beta plane model with the axis symmetric seed vorticity field to investigate the interaction of the seed with the planetary Rossby wave drag. So this animation is showing you that, and the shading is the wind speed and the contour is the vorticity. And the animation on the right side is showing you the azimuthal average tangential wind profile accordingly. So after we turn on the beta, the seed vortex is immediately attracted by planetary Rossby wave, and the outer circulation dissipates quickly. However, the circulation in the dynamic pouch remains roughly unchanged. That means this developing seed has a compact enough structure prior to TC genesis. So when we put this in a barotropic model that only permit planetary Rossby wave drag, the wave drag will not spin down the whole vortex, but only the outer circulation. Wait, not this one. So to further demonstrate, this is the final point, to further demonstrate the importance of this seed compactness, we conduct a sensitivity experiment to test the impact of seed vortex compactness of its on its persistence. So we simply enlarge the seed we had, and by enlarge the size by factor of 2 and 3, this yield two new seed vortices with larger overall size, more total kinetic energy, but less compactness. So if we apply our compactness definition on these three vortices, it shows that the original seed vortex has the highest compactness and the other two has less compactness, the larger the less. So we hypothesize that the vortex with less compactness will decay its intensity faster. And we initialize the barotropic model again with these three vortices, and to see if how different their intensity evolution is. And results support our hypothesis. The original seed vortex has the greatest compactness, which make it decays the least intensity after the beta is turned on for 10 days. And on the other hand, vortices with a loose initial structure will decay faster and more. So this demonstrates that the structural compactness is important to the seed vortex persistency under planetary Rossby wave drag. And these are the conclusion, and I'll just leave you there for you guys to read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we run out of time, so we have to move on to the next talk. Thank you, Kwang Yu.
Thanks.
Next speaker is Dingwei Meng, and the talk is linking seed activity to tropical cyclone frequency, a Hadley circulation perspective.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ling Wei, and I work with Steve Garner in GFDL. And the previous two speakers have give us a very solid background in CTC relationship. And now I want to share a sort of my own thought on this topic. So we already know that TCs always develop from precursors disturbance or seed here, and it's share the similar properties as a TC, but it's weaker. And also, before it's maturing to a TC, it can travel in a steady state over a long distance. And given that seeds are a necessary condition to a TC genesis, so it's natural to ask, to what extent the seed can control the TC frequency. So there are two different views on this discussion. The first one think that seeds are not an independent controlling factor on TC frequency. And just as Patrick Collar just said, she did an experiment which surprised the African Easterly waves. And we can see the Atlantic seasonal TC frequency is not changed when their seed are surprised. And also, this is supported by Emmanuel's synthetic TC track models and his statistic model, which is GPI here. So these models either think that seed are uniformly distributed in time or space, or the seed are not considered as an input to the model. So without considering the role of seeds, models can also largely reproduce the interannual variability of TC. But the other views think that seeds are actually an independent controlling factors. So Congling actually look at the change of TCs under different climate change scenarios. And if he only use the likelihood of a seed to TC, which is P2 here, the change of TCs cannot be totally explained. But if we add the likelihood of a seed genesis, so the change of TCs can be largely improved. Also, our recent work used statistical methods to make sure that the first process is controlled by upward motion and the transition process is controlled by wind shear. So stronger upward motion, more seed born, and stronger wind shear, more seed die. And also, based on this, we built a trajectory-based GPI, which include the non-local information of environment into the GPI. And we can see with the seed informations, the trajectory GPI can predict the spatial distribution of TC genesis much better than if we do not consider seed. So non-local effect from seed can largely improve the prediction of TC genesis, especially the spatial distributions. So given that, we all know that seed can play a role in TC genesis, but if their relationship just simply more seed, more TCs, we can look the difference map of seed spatial distributions between years with more TCs and years with less TCs. We can see that here x-axis is the latitude and y-axis is frequency. We can see in year with more TCs, the seed latitude actually moved equatorward, while in the North Atlantic, it's slightly moved to a poleward. And also this can be seen also from seed index. The seed in year with more TCs is actually moved equatorward. So the seed activity co-vary with TC, but their relationship has inter-basin difference. So now we propose that this interbasin difference between seed and TC relationship can be explained by Hadley circulations. So Hadley circulations have already been used in explain the TC latitude, frequency, and intensity change along different timescales by the environmental conditions its effect. But Hadley circulation is not be used to explain the seed activities there and seed effect on TCs. So we can see that Hadley circulation actually have a upward motion part, and the outflow and inflow can form strong wind shear too. So ATCZ can form within ATCZ, there are really many seeds here and move northward to form TCs. So in this region, we are really care about. So Hadley circulation can help explain the linkage between seed and TCs because it can link upper motion and wind shear together. And also the Hadley circulation can change by varying the north cell or varying the south cell. If the north cell expands and intensifies, which can push the ITCZ to the equator, and because upper motion is increased, there will be more seed. But at the same time, the wind shear is also increased, so more seed will die. So it's like a trade-off pattern between the seed and TC. But if the south cell expands and intensifies, the ITCZ will be pushed forward, so the seed latitude will move to higher latitude. And because the upper motion is increased, so there will be more seed. But at the same time, the wind shear in the south cell will increase, but it doesn't matter because it's located out of the region we care, which is because it's located out of the region of the TC genesis region. So it's simply the more seed, more TC pattern. Let's look at the real world observation. So this is the Hadley circulation string function that calculate from Error 5 reanalysis data. Here is a climatology in East North Pacific, and here is the North Atlantic simulation observation. So you can see a strong south cell here, and the north cells is much weaker. Let's see the difference map of the Hadley circulation between seed active years and seed inactive years. So in the year with more seed, we can see in the East North Pacific, the north cell actually is expanding and intensifying, but in the North Atlantic, it's the south cell that's expanding and intensifying. So the East-North Pacific is actually the trade-off pattern that we talked before. And in the North Atlantic, it has the simple more seed, more TC pattern. And if we look at the difference map of the wind shear and upward motion, the difference map of upward motion is shown in the contour here, and the wind shear is shown at the color shade here. So in the North Atlantic, you can see in the year with more seed and in the year with more TC, there is a basin-wide increase of upper motion. So the seed activity will be more active along the whole in the whole basin. And also because the wind shear increase, but it's located out of the region of TC genesis, and it doesn't matter. So the TC active is synchronized with seed active activities. But in the East-North Pacific, you can see in the seed active years, there is the upper motion is increased basin-wide, but there in the TC active years, there has a small region that has decreased upper motion because the TC active year in the East Pacific is an optimal balance between the increase of upper motion and the increase of wind shear. So give a summary that we know the TC genesis have different stages, and different stages are controlled by different physical process. And also we have provide a heli circulation perspective, and there are two different different situations in different basins. And also this perspective can help us to understand the TC activities in the climate change scenarios. That's all. Thank you so much. And if you have some questions or interest in the manuscript in the trajectory GPI, please email me. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have time for one quick question, maybe. Okay, maybe later. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to remind all the speakers, each speaker has 10 minutes. When you see the yellow light, actually 8 minutes have passed. When you see the red light, 10 minutes have passed. Okay, next speaker is Karen Mueller. The title is the influence of ENSO on future Atlantic tropical cyclone activity.
All right, hello. My name is Taryn Mueller, and I work closely with Dr. Christina Pacicola. And my research is on the influence of ENSO on future Atlantic tropical cyclone activity. So first, the El Nino Southern Oscillation is an SST anomaly that occurs in the equatorial, thank you, is an SST anomaly that occurs in the equatorial, central and eastern Pacific that then impacts something known as the Pacific Walker circulation. So then during El Nino, there's a positive SST anomaly that occurs that causes a shift in deep convection that over the Pacific to the east. This then causes 200 millibar wind anomalies over the Atlantic, which then causes vertical wind shear and vertical wind shear to increase and relative humidity to decrease over the Atlantic. This then causes a suppression of tropical cyclones in the Atlantic. During La Nina, there's an opposite effect that enhances tropical cyclones in the Atlantic. So reliable future projections of TC activity are needed. And this is obviously due to the costly, how the $1.1 trillion in cost and from 1980 to 2020. And it's also been pretty deadly in the last 40 years. So we also have to look at all future relationships such as this ENSO-TC relationship. So how will this ENSO-Atlantic TC teleconnection change in the future and through what mechanisms? So we also have to look at the importance of ENSO diversity to answer this question. Basically, different patterns of SST warming during specifically El Nino events is important to look at. Basically, there is a Central Pacific. Sometimes there's more of an SST anomaly in the Central Pacific or the Eastern Pacific. And based off of that area of deep convection shifts not as much during a Central Pacific El Nino, which can be seen over here, and shifts more to the east during a more Eastern Pacific El Nino, which is over here. So that has to be taken into account. And basically, Atlantic TCs are suppressed more during Eastern Pacific El Nino than Central Pacific El Nino and the historical climate. Other things that could change with ENSO in the future are amplitude, frequency, and this diversity might change also in the future. But even more so, this the importance of the mean state might change in the future. So basically, this SST gradient in the Pacific, if that were to strengthen, like current observed trends are suggesting, the future would have a more La Nina-like environment and then therefore enhance TCs in the Atlantic. But if the future projections that a lot of climate models are suggesting, which is a weakening SST gradient, then it'll be more of an El Nino-like environment. And with that, however, there's a lot of major uncertainty with that because a lot of large climate models do have a lot of biases, especially in this area in the eastern equatorial eastern cold tongue region. So there's a lot of uncertainty with the future of ENSO. So taking those into account when looking at research I did for figuring out this teleconnection in the future, I used the weather research and forecasting model. I used an atmosphere only as I plugged in monthly varying climatological SSTs from the CSM large ensemble, used 27-kilometer resolution, 48 vertical levels. The domain was from 50 degrees north to 30 south around the globe, and each experiment was from May 1st to December 1st. I used lateral boundary conditions from the 6-hourly NSIP 2 analysis data, and each one of my experiments had 5 ensemble members. One of these experiments, the historical climate, you can see what the TC tracks look like here from all 5 ensemble members. So this is, it was able to produce the TCs. So what were the other experiments? Well, I had 2 climate states, one that was historical that used SST configurations from 1980 to 2000 from CSM lens, and a future climate state which used SSTs from 2081 to 2100, used RCP 8.5, and the lateral boundary conditions are also perturbed from the CSM lens that we had in a delta. Each SST had a bias corrected CSM lens, and then also we only used climatological SSTs outside of the Pacific, so only the ENSO states between each experiment were different. Speaking of ENSO states, each climate state had a monthly climatology, an EP El Nino, a CP El Nino, and a La Nina, which were based off and categorized by the ENSO longitude index, which measures the area of deep convection. And you can see with these different SST anomalies on this plot here, it was able to accurately produce La Nina, CP El Nino, and EP El Nino in both historical and future. So with that, the historical simulations, they were able to capture the observed ENSO-TC relationship that we already have researched, which is that the climatology, while producing 20 TCs per year, La Nina produced more at 21.6 TCs per year. CP El Nino produced much less at 12.2 TCs per year, and EP El Nino even produced less with only around 9 TCs per year. So the 2 major influencers here were vertical wind shear, which if you look at the EP El Nino, there was this large area of red or increased vertical wind shear over the Atlantic. CP El Nino also saw this increase, though not quite as much in the Atlantic. And La Nina saw a slight decrease in vertical wind shear over the Atlantic. Relative humidity also saw a relationship with a slight decrease in EP and CP El Nino, and an increase here in red in La Nina, though this trend was more represented with the vertical wind shear, as that matched a lot better with what we saw with TC trends. So now if we talk about what we saw in the future, so the future mean state, we saw only about 74% of the historical TCs, and we also looked at accumulated cyclone energy, which saw about 93% of the historical, which ACE takes into account both duration and intensity as well. But if you take a look at this plot over here, which is the TCs per season, the darker shaded ones represent the future and the lighter shaded ones represent the historical. Each one of the ENSO states had a less or fewer TCs in the future. And then if you take a look at ACE, that also is true for ACE with fewer ACE per each ENSO state, though that was not as great as there was an increase in intensity in the future. Also, if we take a look back at TCs per season, the ENSO Atlantic TC relationship of the historical climate is similar in the future, meaning that La Nina did increase in the future, and both El Nino cases decreased, with EP El Nino decreasing the most. So why did this happen? Well, first we can take a look at the climate difference, which for SST, there was this trend or 2 or more El Nino-like states as the SST gradient did weaken in our model. Also, a vertical wind shear did increase in between the climate states, and the relative humidity did decrease. So the conclusions of this research is that the ENSO-Atlantic TC relationship in the historical simulations did in fact consist with observations, mostly driven by a vertical wind shear with a secondary role from a relative humidity. The ENSO-Atlantic TC tail connection, though, is similar in the future. There are some relatively minor quantitative differences I did not get to discuss about today. All ENSO conditions, there was a future decrease in TC counts and also an increase in intensity. This was mostly due to the general decrease in the change in the mean state, which was seen with the SST gradient weakening in the future. This was driven by the vertical wind shear And this caused vertical wind shear and relative humidity to become less favorable in the Atlantic. There was the Atlantic SST warming was likely what supported the increase in TC intensity. And a quick note that our focus was on the ENSO Atlantic TC tail connection, and additional research is needed to project accurate future changes in ENSO, as there is a lack of consensus. So from there, I will, if there are any questions.
Thank you, Taryn. We have time for a question or two.
Hey, nice talk. Maybe just a clarification. I remember in the first talk, Christina said, ENSO gives you more TCs, and you found La Nina.
Yes, so I should clear that up. La Nina does actually decrease the TC count globally. The Atlantic is different than the globe, though. In the Atlantic, that's actually opposite, though, as there are more TCs during La Nina and less during El Nino. So one's global, one's the Atlantic.
So I'll ask one. I wasn't quite sure. You may have said this, but in your experiment setup, how did you, or did you utilize the 40 ensemble members from the lens? Do they play?
Yeah, so I used 35 of them. They were part of the SST configurations. So yes.
So that helps you get at some uncertainty bounds around the.
Yes, for at least making the SSTs that we plugged in.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Hi, you're talking about like an increase in TC intensity. Is it across all the hurricane categories, or is it like for particular like a minor hurricane, or is it for like a major hurricane?
That's a great question. So we ran these at 27-kilometer resolution. So unfortunately, that doesn't pick up full intensities of most of the tropical cyclones, but we are able to pick up trends because we use accumulated cyclone energy, and that's able to both look at the intensity increases and duration. And we just, from that, we're able to determine that, ACE did not decrease as much. That means that the accumulated cyclone energy per TC was enhanced in the future. So we weren't able to see it like, we weren't like total trends, but we're able to just see the trend, not like the, specifics.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Taryn. We'll have to move on. Our next presenter is Huey Liu. Tropical cyclones, observations, modeling, and predictability today and into the future. Oh, wait, did I have the wrong one?
Oh, this is for Clinton.
Oh, I'm sorry. I read the wrong one. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hui Li. I'm a project scientist at National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR. So today I'm going to talk about subseasonal tropical cyclone prediction in CSM2. So this is a recently published work in collaboration with my colleagues Yaga Richter at NCAR, Chang Li at Columbia University, and Hayami Kim at Stony Brook University. So we care about tropical cyclone predictions because TCs cause a lot of damages, and reliable TC predictions are important for protecting public safety. And TC prediction at subseasonal timescale is relatively new, and it has received a lot of attention in recent years. And research on this topic generally aims to explore the scale of probabilistic TC prediction beyond the current TC prediction time, which is typically 5 to 10 days. And the goal is to identify windows of opportunity for increased forecast scale. So, so today we're going to focus on this one model, is the CSM2 subseasonal reforecast and forecast products. And the model we use in this product is the CSM2 with CAM6 atmosphere. There's also a version with the WACM version, but the CAM6 is the one we use in the CMIP6. And then it uses 1 degree horizontal illusion in the atmosphere and ocean with 32 vertical levels in the atmosphere. So the subseasonal prediction system follows NOAA's sub-X protocol, initializes every Monday, and each one is 45 days long. And the reforecast products is from 1999 to 2020 with 11 ensemble members. The real-time forecast begins in April 2021. You can find all of this information from Richter et al. 2022 paper. So the goal here today is to evaluate the subseasonal TC prediction in the CSM2 reforecast system and try to improve our understanding of the factors that may affect the TC prediction scale. So, so first of all, we're going to find these TCs, right? So we use the Tempest extreme tracking algorithm that to track TCs based on the 6-hourly output from these 11 ensemble members from the hindcast from 2022, 2002 to 2019. We will evaluate the forecast scale in terms of basin-wide weekly TC genesis. So I will present the results according to this outline. So let's first take a look at the predicted TC climatology. So the figure, the panels on the left shows the TC genesis density. The top left here is in the observations. Top right is the week 1 forecast. And the rest of the panels are showing the difference between the forecast and the observation at different lead times. So we see that at week 1, the global distribution of TC genesis is generally well captured. And the difference is, is relatively small. And then if you take a look at week 2, there is a decrease of TC genesis in all of the TC basins. And this decrease seems to persist from week 2 to week 6. And this is also evident if you look at the annual mean TC number in the bar chart on the right. So this shows the annual TC number in different basins. The rightmost column is the global total. And this yellowish green color is the observations, and this greenish color is the week 1 forecast. So again, that we see week 1 is, doing a generally good job, but then there's a dramatic decrease of global TC number at week 2, almost by half. And then interestingly, there's also a little bit of an increase from week 2 to week 6, which I will come back in a bit. And then we also look at the seasonality, and we see that all the forecasts across all lead times are able to capture the seasonal variations of TC genesis. So that was the predicted climatology. And then we also look at the forecast scale in terms of basin-wide TC genesis on the weekly time scale. We're going to evaluate using the Breyer scale score, which basically is the squared arrow of the probabilistic prediction. P is the prediction from the model, O is from the observation. And we're going to compare this Breyer score to a reference Breyer score inferred from the observed climatology. Basically, if you have a BSS that's positive, that means your model is more skillful in predicting TC genesis compared to if you're just going to use observed climatology to predict your TC genesis. So we're going to use 2 different reference Breyer score, but let's come to the details. So this is quite a lot, but basically this is the Breyer BSS in different basins across different lead times. Let's just focus on the red curves in each panel, which shows the BSS reference to the constant annual mean climatology. And we see that this Breyer score is actually positive across all lead times and in all basins, meaning that the model is skillful compared to a constant climatology. And this is largely because the model is able to capture the annual seasonality of TCs. But then if you take out the blue curves right here and in this basin, you will see that this actually represents the BSS referenced to a monthly variant climatology. And we see that it is only positive at week 1 in the Southern Hemisphere, Northern Indian Ocean, and maybe marginally in the Northwestern Pacific, Eastern Pacific. This means that the model is not very skillful at capturing the deviations from the TC seasonal cycle. I hope that's clear. And then we're also trying to understand, what factors that can affect this forecast scale and the TC climatology we saw. So we're going to zoom into 2 factors, the mean state influences as well as the effect of TCCs. In terms of the mean state, we're going to use this Genesis Potential Index, GPI. It combines all the environmental factors that may affect TC genesis. So the top panel shows the GPI from the observations in the Northern and Southern Hemisphere, and the rest of the panels are showing the difference between the forecasts and the observations across different lead times. So we see that, first of all, at week 1 forecast, we do see some biases, but generally small. There's, overestimated GPI in the Northwestern Pacific and Southern Hemisphere. But interestingly, at week 2, we see that and at longer lead times, we see that the GPIs actually have a larger positive bias. This is counterintuitive because a larger GPI would mean that your environment is more conducive to TC activity, which is contrary to what we saw in terms of the simulated TC number. Remember, we saw a big drop of TC number at week 2. So this tells us that the large-scale environmental influence is not the reason why we see the large drop of TC number at week 2. However, from week 2 to week 6, we do see an increase of GPI with lead time, and that may explain why we see this little increase at longer lead times. And then we are trying to understand if it's not the large scale influence, then what? And then we take a look at the TCCs, a common theme of this presentation so far. So we do see that there is a decrease in TCCs, especially from week 2 to week 1, and it's kind of similar from week 2 to week 6. And we think that this underestimation of seed activity in the model is largely because of the model resolution, because we're talking about 1-degree model here. So yeah, we'll come to when we go to the summary, we'll go in a little deeper into that. But next, I want to, say a little bit about the connection with MJO, because, MJO is a major source of predictability for subseasonal timescale. And in CSM2 Chem6, a subseasonal forecast is predictable out to 25 days, kind of a good, good skill. And then we're trying to look at how this relates to the predicted TCs. So this panel shows the TC track density anomalies at different MJO phase. The top panel is the observations. So we do see this enhanced TC genesis propagate eastward following the MJO in the observations. And then if we take a look at the model, we see that at week 1 to week 3, this eastward propagation of TCs with MJO is also present. This means that at least week 1 to week 3, the model is able to capture the TC-MJO relationship. But then beyond week 3, it's a little hand-wavy, so I didn't show it here. So yeah, that's the conclusion. We try to evaluate the predicted TC in the CSM2 subseasonal high cast. We find that climatology is good at week 1, but not so well at week 2 and longer. We see that the scale is also, not very good if you consider deviation from the climatology. And we find that the large decrease of TC number at week 2 and longer is primarily due to the decreased TCCs rather than despite the favorable mean state conditions. But the mean state conditions may be important at week 2 and longer. And we see that TC-MJO is well represented at week 1 to week 3 lead time. And that's what I have to say today. And this is the paper if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei. We have time for a question. Sure.
Hui, as you're showing on the summary slide, the model captures the TC-MJO relationship from week 1 to week 3, but it's not skillful in predicting TC activity in week 2.
Yes.
How do you understand the difference?
That's a very good question. So I guess, although at week 2, the TC number is largely underestimated, but maybe it still captures the variation, maybe still has something to do with the MJO, but the magnitude is quite low. Yeah, that's something I also don't quite understand myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next presenter is Wengyang Choi. Effects of unique marine heat wave ocean structure change on tropical cyclone intensity.
Hello, I'm Hwan-Young Choi. Today, we're going to talk about investigation of ocean structure during marine heat wave leading to tropical cyclone intensification. According to the IPCC report, the extreme weather and climate events will frequently occur and their intensity will be increased. And these are directly associated disaster and it changed the global environment. Among them, marine heat wave is one of the oceanic extreme warming events. As you can see from these figures, marine heat wave occurred everywhere, and it directly affects the marine ecosystem and fishery industry. Also, it changed the ocean dynamic and physical conditions. As you are well known, tropical cyclone is another extreme weather event with strong surface wind and heavy precipitation. It also made a lot of fatalities and socio-economic damage. So many previous studies focusing on how this extreme weather and climate event will change under the global warming. In case of tropical cyclone, if the global temperature rise to Celsius degree, then their intensity and precipitation will be increased. At the same time, marine heat wave frequency and duration will be increased under the global warming. So in the future, tropical cyclones activities are likely to undergo change under the influence of marine heat wave. So this study of object is that how the unique extreme environmental condition impact on tropical cyclone intensity. And at the end, I try to quantify these changes. The next part is the data. I used the NOAA OISST data for calculate the marine heat wave, and I follow the Hapdata's method. So at first, I tried to calculate the 30 years climatological mean SST value, which is blue line. And from that, I set the 90 percentile value as the threshold. Lastly, if the daily SST exceeds this threshold value more than 5 consecutive days, then I define the marine heat wave occurred. And I also used the JTWC data and trim precipitation data. For the latent flux, I used the ERA5, and I also used the glorious data. In this study, I just focusing on the tropical cyclone, which are occurring in the Western Pacific from May to October 1982 to 2019. I divide the tropical cyclone as two groups. This figure shows the example of each case. The color shading shows the SST anomaly, and this black contour line shows the marine heat wave area, and this is the TC trend. So I define the marine heat wave TC as the tropical cyclone stayed in the marine heat wave area for more than 2 days before reach their lifetime maximum intensity. And other group is the tropical cyclone that never experienced marine heat wave. So I used the total 55 marine heat wave TC case and 315 non-marine heat wave TC case. Now I'm sharing with you my result. In this study, I want to check the short-term evolution change. So that's why I figured the day-to-day TC evolution. The red line shows the marine heat wave TC case, and blue line shows the non-marine heat wave TC case. So at the beginning, both two groups have the similar intensity. However, from the -3 days, the marine heat wave TC rapidly increased, and it became more stronger than non-marine heat wave TC case by 16 knots. And I also divide the tropical cyclone as how many days are needed to reach the LMI. Then if in case of the tropical cyclone, it needed more than 6 days, then both two groups have the similar evolution pattern. However, the shorter time needed to reach the LMI, then marine heat wave TC rapidly increase and their intensity will be stronger than non-marine heat wave TC case. So 61% of marine heat wave TC develop into stronger TC, which is belonging to category 4 and 5. And I also checked the precipitation change with the time. So I composite the mean precipitation within 5 degrees from the center of the tropical cyclone. So marine heat wave TC's precipitation is twice heavier than non-marine heat wave TC case, especially in the early stage. Marine heat wave also changed the Arctic Ocean temperature structure. The notable thing from this figure is that in case of marine heat wave TC, the water mass, which are over the 26 Celsius degree, exists 2 to 4 meters deeper than non-marine heat wave TC. Also, the top of the upper layers, the temperature exceeds the 30 Celsius degree in the marine heat wave TC case. This can be increased the ocean heat content, and this higher ocean heat content associated with the TC intensity. I think this change in intensity, precipitation, and Arctic Ocean temperature is closely related with the latent flux change by marine heat wave. So as you can see, marine heat wave TC released a lot of latent heat flux near the TC center. So this result is consistent with the previous study, which is more latent heat flux release than tropical cyclone will be more intense. So I briefly think about the process, how the marine heat wave impact on tropical cyclone intensity. In the ocean, if the marine heat wave occur, then upper layers warming help to water vapor arise into the atmosphere. So at the boundary layer, there has a strong convection occur. After that, in the cloud, there is a stronger moisture convergence, and that moisture also release the latent heat flux. So it makes the secondary overturning circulation. So this series process make the TC intensification. Actually, non-marine heat wave TC also follow the same process, but that is just a little bit weaker than marine heat wave TC case. So I briefly summarize my study. In this study, I want to show the marine heat wave impact in the Western Pacific tropical cyclone intensity. So I classify the tropical cyclone with the two groups, marine heat wave TC and non-marine heat wave TC. So at the beginning, both two groups evolve with the similar intensity. However, tropical cyclone, if they pass the marine heat wave area, then it became more rapidly intense and became more stronger. So compare with the two groups LMI value, then marine heat wave TC is stronger than non-marine heat wave TC by 16 knots. And I think this is the reason why marine heat wave make the extremely favorable ocean and atmospheric interaction. It increased the precipitation rate near the TC center by 51%, and also it helped to accumulate release the latent heat flux in the atmosphere by 65%. So I think this can be the trigger to be more rapid and stronger tropical cyclone. This is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. We have time for a question.
A really interesting talk. Thank you. Have you examined whether there are any systematic differences after if they undergo extratropical transition, systematic differences between the two categories?
In this study, I just focusing on the impact when the tropical cyclones begin with the marine heat wave. So I just focusing only the early stage, but I can expect that if the tropical cyclone pass the marine heat wave area when they are kind of the decay system, then they still remain the stronger TC. So, but I also have to figure out that more detailing, but I think that is continuously stronger.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick one. There's been a lot of work on marine heat waves in the mid-latitudes in terms of duration and intensity. How do marine heat waves, like in the monsoon trough area, how do they compare to the mid-latitude type of marine heat waves in terms of, do they last longer or are they more intense, things like that?
Maybe also it will be affect the monsoon system or other climate events either, but I cannot say the clear answer about that.
Okay.
Because I don't know about
I just
interaction
have
with-
not heard much about heat waves in monsoon areas as much as you do in the mid-latitude. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Our next presenter is Wangping Wang, contrasting responses of Atlantic and Pacific tropical cyclone activity to Atlantic multi-decadal variability.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing in Chicago? I don't know about you, but when I first got here yesterday, I was so disappointed. I came here to see snow, but there's no snow, and I flew all the way from New Orleans, Louisiana. But anyway, we can talk about tropical cyclones, even though it's a cool seasons. So I am an assistant professor at Louisiana State University, and I recently just completed my postdoc training at Berkeley National Labs. Today, I'm going to talk about how the Atlantic multi-decadal variability, AMV, affects global tropical cyclones. Here, I would like to thank my co-authors for their contributions. Since this study is about AMVs, so let me define what AMV is. It's basically the transient sea surface temperature anomalies that occur in the North Atlantic. As we all know, it has a period of 70 years. This is a time series plot of the AMV index. As you can tell, over the past century also, there has been a few phase shifts between cold and warm phases. Most recently, the AMV shifted from a cold phase to warm phase in 1995. Then why do we care about AMV? Well, that's because it has a strong relationship with global TCs. Let me start with the Atlantic tropical cyclone. As you can tell from these plots, these plots are based on observational data. Here, let's focus on the red lines first. Here you can see that Atlantic TC activity has a multi-decadal variations. And here the blue lines are based on the observed AMV index. Here you can see that these two time series coincide. This raises the first question. Is this relationship a coincidence or a causal relationship? Because these data are based on observations, we need to find other tools, such as climate models, to test these questions. And other than the North Atlantic basins, AMV also has an impact on Western North Pacific TC frequencies. Here, this plot is showing us observed TC frequency over the past 4 decades. Here, let's just focus on the blue lines here, because this is based on observations. Here, the most notable feature is that there has been a significant decrease in TC frequency by 18% after 1995. This raises the second question: what are the impacts of AMV on global TC activity, especially outside the North Atlantic and Western North Pacific? To address these two questions, we use climate model simulations from the CIMI-6 Decadal Climate Prediction Project, TCPPs. Here we specifically use its idealized AMV experiments, which include positive and negative phases of AMV. The central questions these experiments address is: what is the effect of AMV on global and regional climate variations? How did they do that? So, climate modelers use a technique named SST restorings. First, over the North Atlantic basin, sea surface temperatures anomalies, including positive or negatives, were imposed by altering surface flux or restoring the SST directly. Here, this map is showing us what one standard deviation of AMV look like. Here you can tell that over the tropical North Atlantics, one standard deviation AMV is about 0.2 degrees C. So here we impose these AMV anomalies over these North Atlantic basins. Then outside of the North Atlantic regions, climate models evolve freely. This allows a full climate system response so that we can answer the question listed here. In this study, we specifically made use of 3 global climate model simulations as listed on the tables. Their resolutions range between 50 kilometers and 200 kilometers. Their ensemble size range between 10 and 25. And 2 sets of simulations were conducted, including the AMV positive and AMV negative experiments. And each simulation spanned a 10-year period. The reason we chose these 3 climate models is that they all impose the same magnitude of SST anomalies, which is 2 standard deviations of the observed AMVs. As you know, this is equivalent to 0.2 degrees C of anomalies over the tropical North Atlantic. Secondly, external forcings such as greenhouse gases were held constant in the year 1950 levels, and TCs in these simulations were checked by the Tempest extremes algorithms. Now let's look at the first set of results based on the high resolution model ECR3P. Here, the spatial map on the left is showing us TC track density difference between the positive and negative phase of AMVs. Over the North Atlantic's, TC densities increase significantly, as shown by the red color and steepings. However, over the Western North Pacific, there has been a significant decrease in TC track densities, and steeping indicates these changes are significant. When averaging this track density over each ocean basins, as outlined here, we make these box plots. Here we can see that over the North Atlantic's, TC frequency increased significantly by 1.8 events per year, which really confirms the earlier findings based on observations. By contrast, over the Western North Pacific and South Pacific, there are significant decreases of TC frequencies. In other ocean basins, we don't find any significant differences between AMV positive and AMV negatives. The second question we tackle is, are the TC responses sensitive to GCMs? Earlier on, I have talked about the results based on the high resolution models, increase over the North Atlantic and decrease over the Pacific Oceans. Then how about the other GCMs? Here, we discover that the TC responses are very consistent across different GCMs. Here you can see that increase in both climate models and then decrease over the other two ocean basins. But over the Eastern North Pacific, the responses are more mixed. The ECR3P models simulate an increased TC frequency, but the CNIM model simulate a decreased TC frequencies. To summarize, these studies focus on the effect of AMV warm phase on global TCs. The primary takeaway from this study is that AMV positives increase TC frequency over the North Atlantic and decrease TC frequency over the Pacific Oceans. Due to the time constraint, I cannot go into details to explain the physical mechanisms. Here I just outline the key findings from our studies. We discovered that the increased frequencies over the North Atlantic has to do with warmer sea surface temperature and weaker vertical wind shears. In contrast, vertical wind shears become stronger over the Pacific Oceans with the AMV positive phase. And everything can be traced back to the change, worker circulations, and the interactions between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And due to the time constraint, I will not explain every component here. With that, I would like to conclude my talk and be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
We have time for one quick question. Yes.
Hi, nice talk. This just for clarification. So the method that you are using, is that typical flux adjustment, or is it pacemaker style SST?
Yes, great questions. So the climate model simulations we use are from the CIMI-6 DCPP. And this is a sub project of CIMI-6. And this is a protocol set up by climate scientists from all over the world. So the flux adjustment is the standard methods in these protocols. And all climate model centers agree on using this approach, and then they apply it to the climate simulations here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Our final presentation in this session is being given online by Emma Levin. Impacts of a weakened Atlantic meridional overturning circulation on tropical cyclone activity in a warming climate. So Emma, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So thank you so much to the organizers and to my fellow presenters. Everyone can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Great, thank you. I will share my screen. And okay. Hopefully everyone can hear the sound. Hello, my name is Emma Levin, and could everyone hear that?
Yeah, we hear it fine. Mhm.
Okay, great, thank you. Hello, my name is Emma Levin, and I'm a student at Yale College. In our research, we examine the impacts of a decline in the AMOC on future tropical cyclones. First, given the potential damage inflicted by tropical cyclones, it is important to study these storms' behavior as our climate changes. Although storms are expected to increase in intensity, it remains uncertain as to how a warmer climate will impact global frequencies. Additionally, the AMOC, or Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, is the Atlantic's major ocean circulation system, transporting surface warm water from the equator to the poles and then cycling back cooler water to low latitudes at depth. Although the AMOC is expected to slow down to the late 21st century, there is still uncertainty about the exact slowdown rate, as you can see from this figure from the AR5 IPCC report. By understanding the impact of the AMOC slowdown on tropical cyclone formation, we can attribute some of the uncertainty we have in projected storm frequencies to the uncertainty of the AMOC slowdown rate. In this study, we used two global warming scenarios with different AMOC strengths. Therefore, our results will not show changes in tropical cyclones, which could be attributed to global warming. Rather, we studied the changes in tropical cyclones caused by a weakened AMOC given a warm state. The first simulation in green is a standard RCP 8.5 simulation with a steadily weakening AMOC from 1980 through 2100. The second simulation in purple was built from the same model as the first one. However, in this case, Liu et al. In 2020 artificially fixed the AMOC strength at 1980 levels. We found the average tropical cyclone GPI, or Genesis Potential Index, as a proxy for tropical cyclone activity for both simulations, weak and fixed, between 2075 and 2100, which is highlighted in the red box. Therefore, in this study, we specifically hope to isolate the impacts of the AMOC on tropical cyclones in a warmer state. To compare the changes in tropical cyclone GPI governed by anthropogenic forcing to the changes in tropical cyclone GPI governed specifically by weakening of the AMOC, we compute the basin average GPI for both simulations during the late 20th century and late 21st century. The pink and yellow bars illustrate the isolated impact of warming on projected tropical cyclone GPI. We find that the model predicts an overall increase in global GPI in a warm climate with both AMOC simulations. However, in the northern hemisphere, the red bar, the weak AMOC simulation, is slightly lower than the yellow bar, the fixed AMOC simulation, which indicates that a weakening of the AMOC slightly offsets this projected increase in tropical cyclone GPI caused by warming. In summary, with this graph, we can observe the relative magnitude of the impact of anthropogenic forcing and the impact of weakened AMOC on basin-wide tropical cyclone GPI. Now, this slide depicts the changes in late 21st century GPI between the weak AMOC simulation and the fixed AMOC simulation. The changes you see in this figure are due to different strengths of the AMOC, not warming. The red portion of this figure depicts regions with higher potential GPI as a result of a weakening of the AMOC. So first, in the North Atlantic, we observe an overall decline in mid-latitude GPI as a result of a weakening of the AMOC, but we observe an increase in GPI near the southeastern US. This suggests that in a warming climate with a decline in the AMOC, the US East Coast could experience more hurricane activity, which has incredible socioeconomic implications. Now, with these observations about the overall change in GPI, we sought to understand the contribution of each variable in the GPI equation to this change. By taking the logarithm of the difference in GPI between the two simulations, we can easily see the contribution of each term to the overall change in GPI, given that the terms are additive when taking the logarithm. This slide shows the log decomposition of the change in GPI for an AMOC decline. Figure A shows the absolute change in GPI between the weakened and fixed AMOC simulations, which I showed a few slides ago. Figure B depicts the log difference in this change in GPI between the simulations. The bottom two panels show the log difference of potential intensity and vertical wind shear between the two simulations. These variables appear to play the largest role in altering tropical cyclone activity. First, in both the North Atlantic and Western North Pacific, the strong decrease in potential intensity contributes to an overall decline in GPI in these basins. Additionally, in the Atlantic, a decrease in vertical wind shear appears to play a dominant role in this increase in tropical cyclone GPI near the southeastern US. Given that vertical wind shear appears to play a key role in governing the spatial shift in tropical cyclone GPI, we further examine the relationship between a decline in the AMOC strength and changes in vertical wind shear using the CMIP6 models. Given the importance of vertical wind shear, we use 19 CMIP6 models to further examine the relationship between a decline in the AMOC and changes in vertical wind shear. To see if the relationship between an AMOC decline and change in wind shear from our simulation is statistically robust, we regressed vertical wind shear onto the change in strength of the AMOC in the RCP 8.5 and historical CMIP6 simulations. We found that across all the model simulations, the weakening of the AMOC is associated with a decrease in vertical wind shear near the US eastern seaboard and an increase in vertical wind shear near the Caribbean and tropical cyclone main development region. In the bottom figure, I plot the mean change in vertical wind shear versus the decline in the AMOC strength from the RCP 8.5 and historical CMIP6 simulations, averaged over these boxes, B on top and C on the bottom. And these are specifically in the North Atlantic. This figure also stresses that there's great variability in the magnitude of projected AMOC weakening across the different model simulations. So in summary, first, in examining the relative impact of global warming and AMOC weakening on tropical cyclone GPI, we found that an increase in warming is projected to increase the overall tropical cyclone GPI. In the Northern Hemisphere, a weakened AMOC in a warm climate slightly offsets the overall projected increase. Next, we found that in a warm climate with a weakened AMOC, tropical cyclone GPI is reduced in the Northern Hemisphere, but locally on a basin scale, there appeared to be a spatial shift in activity. One such notable shift as a result of a decline in the AMOC strength is an increase in GPI near the southeastern US. Lastly, through the log decomposition of the GPI formula, we were able to understand the relative contribution of each variable to the change in GPI. Overall, potential intensity played an important role in the basin-wide reduction of GPI, specifically in the North Atlantic. On the other hand, many of the spatial changes in GPI were governed by vertical wind shear. These results suggest that a decline in the AMOC can greatly impact future tropical cyclone projections. And through a multi-model regression, we find that the CMIP6 models agree in their future projection of a weakened AMOC and the impact of a weakened AMOC on vertical wind shear, specifically in the Atlantic Ocean. Lastly, our results indicate that an AMOC decline does indeed contribute to future tropical cyclone projections, which stresses the importance of better understanding and constraining AMOC projections going forward. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Emma. Very nice. We have time for some questions.